My name is Monica Kretschmer, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network and Women of Inspiration Awards. This is the Women of Inspiration podcast, where we speak with women who lead, inspire, and motivate. Today, we have an incredible guest on our show today. She is making waves in the Metaverse. And I'm looking forward to chatting with Carrie Purcell. She is the VP of Relish Digital and Games. So welcome, Carrie. It's been a while in the making getting you on the show. I know you are just running, but welcome to the Women of Inspiration podcast.
Thank you, Monica. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And yes, it's taken a while for us to get here, but we're doing it. We're doing it.
Awesome. So this is where I'm going to share just a little bit about your background with our listeners today. So Carrie is named in the top 50 female business leaders in Toronto for 2023. So that's really one of your current, accolades. So congratulations, Carrie. You're also awarded the best company and outstanding leadership for 2022 for the Metaverse platform, which is we're going to dive into that. I am excited for you to share all about that because it's such an up and coming area of growth. You are also known as a leader in the emerging technology, bringing 17 years in design and tech. And today you lead Relish Digital and Games. You've been working with brands, global brands such as Salesforce, the NFL, and Lincoln Center to create visual stories, interactive games, and metaverse experiences. Like you're on the cutting edge, girl, the cutting edge. You lead a team of storytellers and world builders, enabling the future of human computer interactions. So Carrie, I am so pumped to be talking to you today. So I guess my first question is, when you were 12, do you remember what you wanted to be when you were 12?
So I love that question because I absolutely do have a very vivid memory of being asked that question. I was probably 10 or 11. It was my grade 5 teacher. And she said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my answer was, I don't know, but I know it's got to be something I'm passionate about. Now, the reason I remember that is because she sort of smirked at me like that's not an answer. And I had to really think, well, why isn't that good enough? And I had gone through my phases of, at 6, I like helping people. I think maybe I want to be a doctor. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew that was something that, I want to help people. This is who helps people. I'd gone through those phases of concrete. This is what I care about. This is what I wanted. This is the job that goes with that. But by 10 or 11, I knew that if I was going to devote all of my time and energy to it, I had to have passion there. So what that job is, I didn't have that answer. I didn't care. And I don't have the answer today. And I didn't have the answer 5 years ago, but I have been working on things I'm passionate about.
That is actually the first time I've ever had anybody that I've interviewed, and I kid you not, that has said passion. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
Doing something that I'm passionate about. And I think that message is so powerful for any of our young listeners that are listening in today. And even the women that are, carving their path at every stage, because it is about passion. If you don't have a passion for something, it's not going to get done. It's going to seem like work. So even though it's passion that sort of inspired you, what I would like to know is if you can share a little bit about that career path and journey, because the metaverse is unique. It's disruptive technology. It's scary for a lot of people because there's a lot of unknowns and it's still emerging and developing. So we're at the cusp of really something big. So how did you get to this point, Carrie?
Yeah, thank you. I do get asked that, right? There are people that want to be in the space I'm in and have no idea how to get here. And that's fair. It's a very new space, and there are a lot of different ways that we could get here and end up here and tackle it from. So for me personally, I actually started in publishing with a focus on educational publishing. So, this idea of storytelling, of literature, and all of that is in my background, but at the time that I started my career, we were in very quickly, we were in a massive state of digital transformation,
Mm,
right? So the advent of ebooks was a big disruption. The incorporation of technology, be it websites, be it gamification elements, be it, any type of digital engagement was new, and we were jumping on board. And when I say digital engagement, I mean we were starting at the time of like CD-ROMs and multi-ROMs. So I mean it was basic, but we were jumping on board and we were figuring it out. Also, different distribution channels for publishing were a massive disruption to the business, and that's where I really started to get more interested in the business side, more interested in how we could harness the technology around us, look for efficiencies. I also became incredibly interested in who our end users were, who our customers were, what they were looking for, and how we were achieving that, and also how we weren't achieving that. So I started in publishing. I started in print publishing with warehouses, with printing presses, with shipping, with all kinds of, bad carbon footprints, and just took in the digital possibilities in front of us,
mm,
the business evolving and really trying to figure out how to get ahead of that. I loved it. I was driven by it. It made sense. We were on the forefront of it. And as the businesses that I was working for were slow to keep up, right? They weren't trailblazers. They had huge infrastructure. They had
mm.
levels of bureaucracy and these types of things. I kept looking for opportunities to break through. So I moved to a smaller, privately run, more agile company that had more of a tech focus. Eventually, I moved into research and development in emerging technologies. So that's when I decided, okay, I've got this interest. I can see the business side of it. I don't know that I have the knowledge and the network around this technology to be able to do what I want to do in it. And I only spent about a year in that space. And during that year, I kind of exclusively full time in that space. In that year, we looked at a massive range of emerging technologies. The network that I was able to meet on a business level, but also on a technical level, on a hands-on development level, was massive. And I did also meet a business partner. We had this idea for solving online education, just making online education more engaging. And keep in mind, this was pre-pandemic when that problem didn't resonate with everybody. It resonated with a small group of distance learning educators and people, students being educated. Um, but we saw the ability to harness the technology we had. So like video game platform technology, virtual reality technology. At that time, we were actually already looking at AI technology, not to the point that we would be today.
Mhm.
So just looking at all of these different elements and how we could improve the experience. And the reason I only spent about a year in that role is because my business partner and I built a prototype and launched it and incorporated a business and went to market. So that's, a lot has happened since then, but that's how I got there. That's how I started.
So you also, and I want to, share a little bit that you also hold an EMBA specializing in blockchain and entrepreneurship and an MA in literature
Yes.
from the University of Toronto. Um, so when I ask this question, it seems like it's never a straight road, but everything that
Yeah.
we do to get to where we need to go has been building on our prior experiences. Would you say that? What words of advice would you give to someone when they look back and go, I don't really have all that skill set? What would you tell them?
Yeah. So I completely agree that we get this idea in our head, I'm going to do this job, and we see it as a linear path, right? These are the steps to get that job, and then I'm going to do that, and this is the next job after that, and the next job after that. And that was not my experience, right? So it may
Mhm.
be some people's experience, it was not mine. And if at that 10, 11, 12-year-old Carrie said, I want to create the metaverse, I mean, we barely well, actually, we didn't have that vocabulary yet. We barely had that vocabulary when I started in that field. Um, and so it's I don't think that you have to be tied to a linear path, right? It wasn't my experience, so I don't think that you do need to. And now what's interesting is what are those models outside of the linear path to give me some idea of how to get there and what to
Mhm.
do. I mean, I'm going to say easy answer. It's work, but it's an easy answer. And my guess is it will resonate with a lot of people that are interested in this conversation. Is just a desire for lifelong learning,
Mm.
right? So the more that we're taking in, I mean, I did an MA in English literature. That was when I was doing university. Then I did a second master's degree almost 20 years later, right? My business master's degree was much later. I did a lot of things in the meantime, and I
Mhm.
knew that I had that interest and had developed that business acumen and all of those other elements. But I didn't have the piece of paper that said it. I didn't have the network of people who had studied it with me. And I thought, this is the time to do that. So along the way, there's going to be all kinds of things that just catch our interest, and digging into those, whether it's formal education, whether it's YouTube channels, whether it's Reddit, whether it's Coursera, whether it's online, free, paid, whatever that way of educating yourself. Again, I think there are a lot of people out there already doing it. And that's where we get those moments to increase our breadth, but also maybe pause and say, hang on, is this more than just an interest that I'm going to incorporate into my today?
Mm.
Is this like is this a right turn or a left turn or a U-turn? And there are parts of my path that I actually think have taken a huge U-turn, where I know I'm not where I started, but I'm the parallel, I'm back to the core of what that storytelling was
Mm.
to me, but on a different path and with many more years of experience behind it.
I love how you put it. The U-turn is the destination where you started, where you realize that's your genius. It actually led you back to your area of genius, but
Yeah.
just doing it in a different way. That's awesome. That's an aha moment, Carrie. That's a powerful one. We need to absorb that. That's the U-turn that gets you to your point of genius. That's a quote,
I love it.
right? That's powerful. Anyways, I love that. So feeding on that point, I'd like to talk about the metaverse. And I mean, how would you explain that to someone that has little knowledge, which is a
Yeah.
large amount of people in the
Yeah.
world, because there's already so many components to it. And so how do you
Yeah.
describe what it is that you do or how you work with businesses?
Sure. So let's start with just the really simple, what is a metaverse? So a metaverse is a virtual environment, typically a 3D virtual environment. Doesn't have to be, but typically 3D virtual environment that is persistent. So it's always open, it's always on. And in a gaming perspective, it's multiplayer, right? So there are several of us that can go in and out at any time, typically in the form of an avatar, and we can interact for a variety of purposes. Sometimes it's social, sometimes it's educational, sometimes it's simulated trainings. There are all these different reasons that we're going to use these virtual spaces. Now, there actually at this point is a lot of writing about where the term was coined. Matthew Ball has a great description that is kind of the more technical academic description. And absolutely, if you're at that level, dig into some of that writing. There are books that have been published on this. Matthew Ball is one of the first to publish on this metaverse space. So there's a lot more under there, and there's a lot of debate on the peculiarities, and does it have to be full virtual reality? Can it be accessed just in front of my computer or on mobile? Which of these count as a metaverse, which don't, and the tiny little definitions as to why it may or may not count. But for a very general understanding of what we're talking about, we're just talking about a virtual space. It could be VR, it could be on my from my view, it could be VR on my computer, on my phone, it could be an AR experience that is persistent and has communication with others.
So my next question, and thank you for articulating that and citing some sources where people can actually dig in a little bit further on that. But you've worked with some big companies like Salesforce, the NFL. Like, how are these great big, you know,
Yeah.
international companies utilizing the metaverse to build culture or customer loyalty? How is that working for them,
Yeah.
or what should we get excited about?
Yes. Okay. So that is a big question with all kinds of answers, and I will try to give some concrete examples. So again, when I started in this space, at least as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, we ran our own platform. We Part of the challenge was really designing this space that would allow for that level of communication and also could handle large groups of users, of people on the platform, which is a challenge depending on how you're accessing the technology. And we were very focused on education and corporate training and events, right? So in a keep in mind, we started pre-pandemic, but during the pandemic, this resonated broadly, and it resonated globally with people who could no longer attend in-person events. I know that, I know that UWN has been pausing the in-person events and getting very excited about how to relaunch the in-person. And there's so much power and energy in those events. But there is a way to replicate a version of it virtually as well, and that's what we were really interested in, right? That human interaction design piece is really what's natural for us as users, even when we're incorporating that technology piece. What makes us feel good? What makes it intuitive for us? What do we understand? And you can recreate a version of your real world. So we built a virtual 3D conference center. We made it futuristic with a big, beautiful globe dome that was glass and see-through, and I could look through at all of the sites, but I could also literally walk down a hallway and run into Monica, who I haven't seen for months and I haven't talked to, and I didn't formally book my Zoom call with where I have to show up and all of that. But I just bump into her, and I can just use my voice and say, "Oh my gosh, Monica, here you are. Let's have a chat. How have you been? What's happening?" We can text, we can do all of these different interactions. So that's where I started. Moving into Relish was an awesome opportunity to then step back and say, okay, all of these other companies are thinking about solving problems for themselves, right? So whether it's client engagement, whether it's a gamification component, whether it's a branding activation, right? So a part of their launch strategy, whether it's just trying to reach a broader audience. So some of the work that we've done is, based in cultural centers that are physical environments where you might look at art, or you might attend a conference, or you might attend a concert, or all of these different things that typically are geographically and physically defined. But if you could put it in the metaverse, and I think many people listening will have heard of some of the most famous concerts that have already been held in the metaverse, you're suddenly reaching a global audience. And it's a different experience, but you're going much broader. You may or may not be monetizing it, right? It often isn't about actually collecting ticket sales on that. It may really just be about reaching people, branding, promoting, any of those elements. So there's a lot of ways people are thinking about it. Today, they're definitely also looking at ways to incorporate AI. And with Apple's announcement about Apple Vision Pro, they're also really thinking about like spatial computing, that VR element, like how do I bring how do I bring the digital world into my real world instead of blocking off my real world to go into the digital world? So there's no one answer. This is a huge conversation I love having, but hopefully that gives you a taste of what people are thinking about and how they're thinking about it.
So incredible opportunities at all levels for branding, for marketing, for reaching your customers, for expanding your reach globally. Like, I get so excited to hear about that. And as you were talking about, the ideas to hold conferences, of course, my mind's going to Women of Inspiration Awards and, the North America, or the ability to, invite others from around the world into that space.
Yes.
Where they
Yes.
can connect and join. I mean, that's so
Yes.
exciting. So really exciting. Like, I can't even imagine that you probably don't sleep at night, because I wouldn't. I mean, I would be constantly getting new ideas every single night. So I'd be like sleepless, for sure. But what are some of, let's just say, the barriers that you have faced getting to this point?
Mm,
Number one, as a female in a very male-dominated industry, you're a vice
yeah.
president of a company that is, so here's your in a senior leadership role, leading a business but you're also in a male dominated industry. So let's talk about some of those challenges. Are they truth or tabloid?
So 100% there are challenges. And I am an optimist. I am a collaborator. I am resilient. A lot of it, I won't necessarily say I don't notice, but a lot of it rolls off my back, and I'm goal oriented, and we're gonna work together and push forward. Um, but but it exists. Now, it exists in rooms where people introduce, I am often the only female in the room, and I mean a virtual room, a physical room, it doesn't matter. But I'm often the only female. I am the only female executive in my organization. The last business that I ran had a male business partner, and I was the female. Another business that I run, we have two male business partners, and I'm the only female. That has been my world. And if I were uncomfortable, I probably wouldn't be here. But it doesn't mean that I don't have to also proactively pay attention to various barriers and pain points and adjustments in interaction, and strategically approach that in a specific way. So yes, that has been there. There is, specific. So I was starting to say, I walk into a room, virtual or otherwise, and it often starts with, "Hey guys," right? Pretty casual, but it's also gendered. And I grew up, whether it was the age or the generation, guys didn't. That was very common to me, right? That isn't one that hits me and means a gendered thing. Like, I am talking to the men in the room and I'm not paying attention to you. But the reality of the workplace today is that it does mean that to a lot of my employees and peers and colleagues. It also might mean that I'm assuming a gender to somebody who doesn't that isn't how they feel, right? So that's not what they identify as. And I take that really very seriously. Does it mean that I will never slip and say guys? It actually doesn't. It doesn't mean something different when I say it. Realistically, it doesn't. It shouldn't. But it does mean that it's something that I speak to, that I make sure that I let people know that it is excluding all kinds of people in the room that don't resonate as guys. I won't pick any specific organization when I give this example, but when I look at things like merit increases and I look at the pay scale, I have seen too many times that they are not equal and they're not balanced. And there's always a good story for why, but the reality is that there are clear patterns that show females being paid less, females at all levels, including at the executive level. There's a lot of evidence and research around negotiation style, right? So in some cases, it's how it's negotiated, that men will negotiate fiercely, that women will accept they're given what they're offered. And there's a lot there for sure. But the reality is, as a leader, female or otherwise, when I look at that, my job is to make sure that equal work is being compensated equally, right? That's really important. I don't actually care what the story is for how we got there and how we made that decision. I care that if we're going to do all of these levels of assessment, right? If we're going to measure and we're going to say this level, this role, these measurements, then we're going to treat that fairly. So, I mean, those are a few things. I don't know that has more to do with being in a male technical world, but those are just realities. On the technical side, I think that there are certainly people that might underestimate what I bring to the table. I think that there are people that, I mean, I get treated differently in different ways, right? I also have to enter the conversation in a different way. So there are a lot of very bold and decisive ways of saying things, and I often can't do that and have it well received. I am known for I am known for a calm pause because I have to. I don't get to just say the first thing on my mind and have it be received properly, or have it be received the way that it's intended, or the way that it may be received if somebody else said it. And I'm also known for occasionally saying, Sorry, I was still speaking. Did you lose audio? And that means that somebody spoke over me, somebody interrupted me, somebody didn't give me the room to speak when it was my space, my turn, my role, my level. So those are a few.
Love them both. I'm a big fan of the calm pause, right? It's strength is silence sometimes. Because when you stop, everybody else looks, why did she stop? Did something just happen that shouldn't have happened? That's a great one. And also that hold on, wait, there's some interference here. Let's step back. So I think those are really great things and we need to talk about it a little bit more. And like you said, sometimes I think we all say things that we shouldn't, or make references that we shouldn't, and it's not intentional. Those are the one-ofs, and they're the, oh, my apologies, or it just rolled off just because I'm like you, I grew up guys, and like the same thing. And so there are the unintentional biases that we kind of just share, which we don't even know that we're sharing sometimes, and we catch
Yes.
us. So it's good to like nip it in the butt,
Yeah.
come forward with it. But it is interesting that the pay is still an issue. Why can't we just get on board, like inspire that change to take one action? And I know it's bigger for the larger companies, of course, right? That's a big undertaking, and but oh my goodness, when you're just starting out, or when you're navigating that path, how much easier is it just to be transparent?
Absolutely.
I mean, you would think that there would be less complications because you're transparent, because you don't
Yep.
have different rules for everybody, right?
Yep.
So the benefit is that there are no secrets.
Yep.
So we got to still be talking about that all day long.
Yes.
So
Yes.
with that said, we have, you talked about your business partners as being male. We've talked about being a support her and our allies, and how, important it is to bring men to the conversation that get it, that understand it, they understand pay equity,
Yep.
championing for women, that we are equals in this world, and in business, especially in what we bring to the table. So who are some of those supporters in your world, and how have they helped support you in your work and achieving
Yeah.
success?
Yes, I really appreciate that question. I love the name, the terminology, the support her. There's no if there's a villain, it's not a gendered villain, right? It's not that the man is the villain, and certainly not in my world. So yes, there have been people that have played a significant role. My husband is the biggest one. My husband and I have our different areas, but we are completely equal and supportive and partners in what we want to do and what we want to spend our time on. That's always been our relationship, but there was a point where I said I spent about a year in emerging technologies research, and that was a full-time job. It had a pension. It was a good job, and I decided to quit that job to go to a pre-revenue startup that was not going to pay me. Now, so I mean that's one of those things that in any kind of relationship, if it may be a barrier, it may be a challenge, it may be a non-starter. It wasn't in my world, right? I was 100% supported in every way that I could be, whether it was making introductions in networking in areas that I didn't have that, whether it was picking up the slack if I wasn't able to contribute, if I was spending more time or I was contributing less money, none of that mattered. Um, because we were completely partnered in what we were trying to do, and he has been able to go after anything that he wants to, right? Those passions, those dreams, as am I, and was I. And now I'm industrious enough that I was certainly doing other things in the background to pull my weight, but there's no end to the list of things that my husband has done as a support her. As a child, the inspiration that I could work on whatever I wanted to as long as I was passionate about it, I will credit that to my father. So I would say that my father, though, I think he did grow up in a very he definitely grew up with gender roles. He definitely sees himself as the patriarch. I was his first daughter after his first son, and somehow I was still, I was still just allowed to be who I wanted to be, to take without asking, to ask for forgiveness later, to do all of these things that maybe people don't teach their daughters, and maybe men do in the world. But no, I was, my father still enabled me in that way. So I will give him credit that I didn't have to be that doctor. I didn't have to be. I had to be educated. I had to. We were told that we had to go to university, but I wasn't told what I had to do in university. I was allowed to explore that and be supported 100% in that venture. And as you said, I have had male business partners. It's I would love to partner with women. It has nothing to do with that. I'm just in this space where it's hard to find them. It's part of what I value about this organization, and Monica, about you, and the many women that I do have in my network that I work very hard to find, and then really develop those relationships. But so far, all of my business partners have been men. We have had very, very supportive relationships. They have made opportunities and room for me, and likewise I for them. So there you go.
Well, thank you for sharing. I think we don't talk about that enough. And I know that that is one of our biggest things. I say the insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we truly want to achieve equity, invite half the population to the conversation. And so I love
Yeah.
how you touch on your husband, your father, and your work network, where it has that male influence, which has helped you not only succeed but flourish. So more conversations to be had in that area. And I hope the guys that are listening, they actually are inspired by hearing that as well, because they do bring value to the table. What I would love to actually now talk about is those rock star women and those female leaders. Like, there are so many incredible women like yourself that are doing great things. So, what are some of the things that inspire you most about females and the leaders that you're surrounded with?
So it's funny. I met with one of them just earlier this afternoon, and I realized that while we had a very serious business conversation, me in an advisory role, her running she is an absolute rock star, has an amazing business, has accolades, has everything going for her. We started the conversation with a level of vulnerability
Mm,
that I don't find generally in my conversations. In my day-to-day meetings, we don't start there. And it was only a couple of minutes, but it started with a real how are you doing, right? Knowing some of the big things that had happened in both of our weeks that are not the things you want happening in your week, right? And then the next question she asked me is, what are you grateful for? Just to reset
mm,
on, like, what are the amazing things happening in your world? And then we got down to business. And that level of just vulnerability and connection, that I'm going to attribute to, I mean, she is an amazing individual, so it's attributing it to her, but also to her femininity, right? And her comfort with herself and her value system. So I think that's a big piece, is that vulnerability allows us to support one another, and to build ourselves up, and to learn, to thank each other for sharing that. I think that's a big piece. I also look around, the last Women of Inspiration, Changemakers book. There's one woman on the cover who is just like absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, she's since passed, but Mary Hazel McCallion. I grew up in Mississauga, and she ran our city, and she ran that city like a tight ship, with exceptional budgets, with exceptional schools, with exceptional roadways, my whole life. And so you don't have a moment to stop and say, wait, why is it you? We had a moment to stop and say, wow, she's really old and she's still doing it, because she was, and she was.
yeah.
And so, there's something to just proving it, to just doing it, to just being there. I don't know what challenges she faced. I don't believe she faced any, because that's not what I saw. That's not who I saw. right? And of course, I'm sure she did. I'm not that idealistic. But it's just seeing these examples of I, I mean, for me, I genuinely haven't given a lot of thought to my gender and how that impacts my professional career until those moments when the world and the environment around me that makes me think about it. Otherwise, I go out into the world thinking that it's no different for me than it is for anyone else. And and those are the female leaders that I admire the most, right? They show us that is possible.
It is so interesting that, number one, I really love your, how we approach meetings, and we bring that empathy forward, right? And that vulnerability, that is clearly, like, we all get that, and then we move on, it's business. But I think we don't have that even when we're interacting with each other. I think it's a real big connector with relationships in general, is that common ground and respect and trust. That is kind of
Yes.
really important. And that's what women bring to the table. We can establish very quickly in a lot of situations. And my dog is barking, so I'm going to pause this for just a moment. So we also need to acknowledge Hurricane Hazel McCallion. Like, she is a rock star. And I want to share with you, my next question, of course, is going to be, have you ever felt imposter syndrome? So it's interesting that you say, like, one of the most impactful female leaders that you really, admire is Hazel. And when I've chatted with Hazel and we did a podcast, I remember, Hazel, I've got this great question for you. Like, like, we all talk about imposter syndrome. Look at all that you've accomplished. And I
Yes.
said, have you ever, felt imposter syndrome? Just a little bit. She flat out, one word, no. That was it.
Yeah.
No, not in her 100-year at the time when I chatted with
Yeah.
her on our podcast. There was no expression, no laugh, no giggle, no, it was no. Just,
Yes.
that's a complete sentence. And I'm like, Hazel, you are the only person that I've ever spoken to. You are the 1%, because every other woman that I've ever spoken to, even men, say that there's an element
Yeah.
of imposter syndrome in that space of growth. And I think she's just remarkable. She leaves an incredible legacy. And yes, so I'm just like, I'm a huge Hazel McCallion fan. And yes, she believes that, when you're young, you start learning and growing. So, to your point, when your passion has sort of guided you, she's like, you work hard, you follow your path. She goes, you need a plan for business, you need a plan for life. Hazel was all about a plan. You need a plan for business, a plan for life. And that's the way she worked herself. So anyways, love your example of female leadership. And some of the differences. That's purely that's it in a nutshell. We can go home now.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and the thing is, that's what she exuded, right?
Mm,
I believe you because that's what I saw. And only as a female leader at the age that I am, do you stop and say, well, what was really behind the scenes? What was really under there? But that's what I saw, is this little tiny woman who was, by the way, at my ballet school anniversary cutting a ribbon. She was at the annual Bread and Honey Festival, sitting having pancakes with me and my family. She knew our names. I mean, Mississauga is not a small city. She was everywhere. She knew us. She was absolutely a businesswoman, but she was a community leader
mm.
who knew who she was, who was very present, I mean, yeah, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And it sounds like she knew that. There you go.
But she was very humble at the same level too. I attended, when we
Oh,
did
yeah.
the book launch, and specifically a little interview at Hazel's house. And I'm like, how do you do it all? Like, how have
Yeah.
you really maintained that level of, motivation, and just kept going? Because she was still doing emails.
Yes.
She's like, I just had a Zoom call, and she was 100. And, she
Yes.
advised, the city of, a lot of other mayors that would call her for advice. And so she was still having Zoom calls going back and forth. And she said, you know what? I've always been independent. Do your homework, be independent. Don't be a wallflower. It was one of her things. Don't be a
I
wallflower.
love it.
And she says, I still mowed my own lawn. And I saw how big her yard was, and it was fairly big. We're sitting in the back, and that was a big yard to mow. So ever since that moment, I'm never ever looking at my yard and thinking that I can't mow that lawn because Hazel mowed
Yes.
her lawn, right? It just really small things that women do that you admire really kind of go, I'm never complaining about mowing my lawn ever again because I want to be like Hazel.
Yeah,
Right? I'll
absolutely.
never, kind of boohoo about that one. Anyways,
Yeah, and if I want to give a quick little shout out to my sister who was out mowing her lawn while pregnant with a child on her back. So she had three kids very quickly, and the first two of them were on her body while she was pushing that lawnmower. Yeah, we have strong women around us.
right? And here's to the strong women around us. Like, yes. And so that is almost my next question. I want to go back to the imposter syndrome question, and then I'm going to go back into why it's so important to celebrate women. But first,
Yeah.
have you ever felt imposter syndrome?
So I promise you, if you had asked me this last year, my answer would have also been no. I just didn't. And now, not today, not in this moment, but in the past year, yes, I have.
Mm.
And it was very disorienting for me to acknowledge what it was and try to identify what was causing it and where it was coming from and what I felt about it, whether I agreed or disagreed, where changes had to be made. So I have, and it's new to me, and I don't like it.
So, may I share where I feel imposter syndrome? I
Yes.
feel that, and I've learned to embrace that because the imposter syndrome that I feel is part of our growth as an individual.
Yeah.
Because when we're stepping out into uncomfortable zones that we may or may not know what's coming down the path, that kind of things, do I have what it takes to take me there?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the imposter syndrome, at least for me, comes from. And then all of a sudden I sit back and then I go, oh my God, I totally have what it takes. Confidence kicks in. And then you're like, I have all the skills I need in the mindset to master anything. And so I think it's the fear of doing things that are uncomfortable or new are always going to be a little bit kind of just, that's the imposter syndrome. Do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
And if we all
Yeah.
look back into our toolbox, we have more than what it takes to do absolutely anything if we set our mind to do.
Yes. That's a beautiful perspective. I love that framing and that definition for it.
So, my next question for you is, why is it so important to celebrate the achievements of all these incredible women like yourself?
So, so it's a really important question, and the only way that I can, so I'm going to answer it from a few different perspectives. One is I mentioned that today, my current role, I'm the first and only female executive in the room, and I had a female employee who was on maternity leave when I started, and when she came back, I had a one-on-one with her. She doesn't report directly to me, but we had a chat. And she said to me, I was so surprised that you were here in this role. And I knew that things had changed at this company when I saw that. Now, I didn't know that I was blazing coming in, right? I knew the people that I was working with. We had been in the same sphere. We had been consulting and working on things for the past 5 years. To me, it was a fairly natural next step, and it seemed to be to them as well. But the fact that it had that level of impact on one single individual and a much larger group within the organization showed me how important it is to model, right? So I talked
Mhm.
about at the beginning of this that I don't think we have to take a linear path. The problem with taking a non-linear path is that we haven't, in many cases, we just haven't seen it. How do I know Hazel McCallion has this plan for life and business? Well, if how do I know the next step in that? If the technology hasn't been invented, the role hasn't been invented, I've never seen someone else do it. I've never seen somebody take that next step to get that title, to get that job, right?
Mm.
So I think it is so much more important then I've really given weight to in my career, that we do model, not role model, but that we model these different roles, these different paths, these different opportunities, these different ways of communicating, the ability to be vulnerable at the beginning of a meeting, all of these things that may look and seem a little bit different to people outside of my world, and show them it doesn't have to be different. Anybody can do it this way. Anybody can do it a little bit differently than you've seen it, and let's show you some ways that that could look, so that you can try to create that path for you. So that sort of one point of view was really important for me as a leader in my organization. As a peer, when I look at my colleagues, there are so many, I've already mentioned in this conversation as well, there are these incredible women in my world. They are not my peers in my workplace, and many of them are not my peers in my industry. And we've pointed that out as well. I'm hoping I'm hoping we can change that, and I'm hoping that we can build career pathing and education and all of these building blocks, so that we do see a change in who gets to be in this industry and who gets to be in the executive boardroom.
Mhm.
But as somebody in this position, having these incredible women who are entrepreneurs, who are business leaders, who are CEOs, they're founders, they're vice presidents, they are leading the charge in their own area, seeing how they do it, seeing where their strength is and where their grace is, having somebody who can share the moment in the day where things haven't gone well, and maybe you knew it was going that way, or maybe it didn't.
Mhm.
And again, it doesn't, I keep coming back to the idea that for me, it doesn't have to be gendered. It didn't have to be gendered, but I can tell you there are these very special female relationships with female leaders that I can look to, that I can lean on, that I can support, that I can connect with. And so for me, on at a peer level, it's so important that those women are there in my life, and that I'm able to support them in the ways that they need from me, and maybe the ways that they don't realize that they need, that I can also contribute to.
Beautiful. So I love how the wrapping up is how important representation matters and
Yes.
role modeling leadership. And so that is why recognition is so important. And that's why stepping into the
Yes.
spotlight is essential. And it's not the most comfortable for everyone. But I think if we reframe it in a different light, that it's our responsibility as leaders to step into that spotlight, to take up that space, it provides
Yes.
permission for others to do the same. Would you agree?
Yes. Absolutely. 100%. Very, very nicely articulated. And I 100% agree. I really do. I think it is so important.
So, I'm going as this has been an amazing conversation, and I'm thrilled to have had this opportunity to have you on the podcast. And I can't wait for you to be part of the Changemaker book number, that we're going to be releasing, for International Women's Day 2024. But what I'd love to sort of wrap up, there's two questions. Number one, we talked about your career path and your journey and who the female leaders are, and the wonderful support network that you have and the support hers. But what words of advice would you give to any woman that is carving her career path and journey? What words of advice would you give her to sort of say, you got this, believe in your passion and go?
Well, those are great words that you just put out there. You've got this. Believe in your passion and go. I love it. I think go. I truly believe in being goal oriented, the same way that it sounds like
Mhm.
Hazel was. Do it with an open mind. I'm just going to say, do
Mm.
it with an open mind. There are going to be opportunities that come in front of you that you may have wanted. You may have thought they were 5 years down the road. You may have never imagined you were going to get them. Be very open minded and be welcoming to those, and see whether they fit your goals and your path, because there's going to be a big world in front of you.
Beautiful. And it wouldn't be a 1 minute of inspiration podcast without me asking you, what is your definition of a woman of inspiration?
I love it. So I will sidestep it only to say that I answer this in the book that you will get to read in 2024. And my answer is the names of women around me that inspire me, that are incredible, and that have stories that are worth listening to and paying attention to.
Beautiful. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure, Carrie, to speak with you. I'm super excited for the journey ahead and how it's going to unfold, and having future conversations of how we can build the metaverse into the Universal Women's Network. Like,
Yes,
now you just
absolutely.
opened up my mind to a whole new world, which is pretty exciting. I think I have to close that door right now, but that space will be there. And, I just love the conversation. That was very authentic and real. And I hope that our listeners also enjoyed that. So how can our listeners get a hold of you, learn more about what you're doing? If there's
Mhm.
opportunities to bring more women into, your space, or contact you, how would they do that?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So first of all, thank you for this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for creating this space, this medium, this podcast where we can share these stories and connect. For me, LinkedIn is a great place to find me. So Carrie Purcell at LinkedIn. You can go to my newest website, audiolife.io, a super awesome, fun project that I'm excited about working on. You can check us out as well at Relish, which is relish.sh. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep in touch. There are all kinds of things that I'm working on with Monica and with others that and with I teach a little bit at the college as well, where I'm just keeping in touch with young people, looking at ways to create those pathways and those building blocks to get more people into my space and
Mm.
technology, but also just to look at super fun ways to work together, like I hope we will do with the Metaverse and the Universal Women's Network.
I think it's in the stars. We're manifesting that already, Carrie.
We're
Well,
doing it. We're doing it.
we are doing it. It's already done. It's already out there now. I got to tell you, it's done. We'll just have to let the universe do its work. Fabulous conversation. And again, for those of you that are listening, we welcome you to share this podcast widely. There's going to be a woman, there's going to be a man, there's going to be an future leader that needs to hear this conversation today, and just be open to celebrating the successes of all of those great women in your world. And thank you, Carrie, so much. I look forward to the journey ahead, and you're a rock star. You are just a rock star and one of my women of inspiration.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I love this.
Okay, take care, Carrie. Bye.
And you. Bye.